Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story. Every day, we uncover the truth, one secret at a time. My name is Andrew, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the person sleeping next to you is the one systematically destroying your entire financial future. I met Vanessa at a charity gala in the spring of 2019. I was there representing my company. I'm a senior project manager at a mid-sized engineering firm, and she was there with her marketing agency. She wore this emerald green dress that matched her eyes, and when she laughed, it felt like the whole room brightened. We talked for hours that night, long after the event officially ended, sitting on the museum steps and watching the city lights. She was everything I thought I wanted. Ambitious, creative, passionate about her work. She ran her own boutique marketing firm, specializing in luxury brands and high-end events. She talked about her clients with such enthusiasm: destination weddings she'd promoted, product launches for designer labels, influencer campaigns that went viral. I was impressed by her drive, her vision, her confidence. We started dating seriously within a month. By summer, she'd moved into my condo, a two-bedroom place in a decent neighborhood that I'd bought 3 years earlier. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, fully paid off thanks to an inheritance from my grandfather and years of careful saving. Financial security had always been important to me. I'd watched my parents struggle with debt my entire childhood, and I'd promised myself I'd never live that way. Vanessa seemed to share those values. She talked about building wealth, investing in property, creating a stable future. She mentioned she had some student loans from her MBA program and a car payment, but nothing unusual. She contributed to groceries and utilities, though I noticed she was often vague about her exact financial situation. When I suggested we open a joint account for shared expenses, she said she preferred to keep things separate until we were married. I respected that. I thought it showed independence. In December of 2020, I proposed. We'd been together for a year and a half, and despite the chaos of the pandemic, our relationship felt solid. I proposed on a hiking trail where we'd had our first weekend trip together, with a ring I'd saved for over 6 months to buy. She cried when she said yes. She immediately started calling her mother, her sister, her friends. The excitement was contagious. The wedding planning started almost immediately. Vanessa had always been clear that she wanted a big wedding, a real celebration, not a courthouse ceremony or a backyard barbecue. She'd been to dozens of high-end weddings through her work, and she knew exactly what she wanted. A ballroom venue, a designer dress, a live band, flowers that looked like they belonged in a magazine. A guest list of 200 people. I told her we needed to set a realistic budget. My salary was good. I made about $90,000 a year, but I wasn't wealthy. I suggested we aim for $30,000 to $40,000 total, which I thought was generous. We could each contribute half, I said, and maybe her parents would help with some costs, as is traditional. She agreed. She said she understood. She promised we'd stay within budget. The first warning sign came in February 2021. I was checking my credit score, something I did quarterly out of habit, and noticed it had dropped 15 points. Not a disaster, but unusual. I hadn't opened any new accounts or missed any payments. I pulled my credit report and found an inquiry from a credit card company I didn't recognize. When I called them, they told me an application had been submitted in my name, but was declined due to their verification process. I asked Vanessa about it. She looked confused, said she had no idea what I was talking about. She suggested maybe it was identity theft, that I should put a fraud alert on my credit. I did exactly that. I filed a report, froze my credit with the major bureaus, and assumed the problem was solved. The wedding planning continued. Vanessa spent hours on her laptop, browsing venues and photographers. She'd show me options, and I'd give my input, but honestly, a lot of it looked the same to me. I trusted her taste. This was her world, after all. She understood what made an event special. In April, she told me she'd found the perfect venue, a historic mansion with gardens and a ballroom that could accommodate 200 guests. The cost was $18,000 for the day, which was higher than I'd hoped, but she explained it included tables, chairs, and coordination services. She said she'd already put down a deposit of $3,000 from her savings, and we could split the remaining $15,000. I agreed. I wrote her a check for $7,500. A week later, she showed me the photographer she wanted to hire. His portfolio was stunning magazine-quality shots, perfect lighting, artistic compositions. The package she wanted was $6,500. I winced but agreed to split it. Another check for $3,250. Then came the dress. She took her mother and sister to a bridal boutique and found a gown she described as the one. It was a custom designer piece, silk, hand-beaded with a cathedral-length train. The cost was $8,500 plus alterations. She said traditionally the bride's family paid for the dress and her mother had agreed to contribute $3,000. She asked if I could cover the remaining $5,500 as an early wedding gift to her. I hesitated. That seemed like a lot for a dress. But she looked at me with those green eyes and said, "I only get to do this once, Andrew. I want to feel beautiful on our wedding day." So I wrote the check. By June, I'd contributed over $20,000 to the wedding, but Vanessa assured me we were still on track. She'd handled a lot of the smaller vendors herself, she said, using her industry connections to get discounts. I didn't need to worry about every little detail. That's when the credit card applications started again. I'd temporarily lifted the freeze on my credit to refinance my car, and within 2 weeks I received welcome packets for 2 new credit cards I'd never applied for. Both had been opened in my name with my social security number, but sent to a P.O. box I didn't recognize. I called the credit card companies immediately. They confirmed the accounts were active. One had a $5,000 limit and a current balance of $4,800. The other had a $7,000 limit and a balance of $6,200. The charges were all related to wedding vendors, a florist, a caterer, a rental company for linens and centerpieces. My hands shook as I scrolled through the transactions. Someone had opened these accounts in my name and was actively using them. The signatures on the applications when I requested copies looked like mine but slightly off, traced or forged. I knew. Of course I knew, but I didn't want to believe it. I confronted Vanessa that night. I printed out the credit card statements and laid them on our dining table. "Did you do this?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. She looked at the papers, and for a moment I saw panic flash across her face. Then she started crying. She said she'd been trying to protect me from stress. She knew I was worried about money, and she didn't want the wedding to become a source of anxiety. She'd opened the accounts planning to pay them off herself before I ever found out. She had a big client contract coming through, she said, that would cover everything. She'd made a mistake, she admitted, but it came from a place of love. She didn't want me to feel like she was draining my savings. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. She was sobbing, apologizing, promising she'd fix everything. She said we could cancel some of the vendors, scale back, return things. She begged me not to throw away our relationship over a financial misunderstanding. I told her she'd committed fraud. She'd forged my signature and stolen my identity. She damaged my credit and put me in debt without my knowledge or consent. She said she'd fix it. She swore she'd make it right. Against every logical instinct I had, I agreed to give her one chance. One. She would close the accounts immediately, we'd create a payment plan, and she would have no access to anything related to my finances ever again. She agreed to all of it. For 2 weeks, things seemed calmer. She showed me confirmation that she'd contacted the credit card companies. She said she was working with them to resolve the situation. She seemed genuinely remorseful. Then I checked my bank account and discovered a withdrawal of $12,000 I hadn't authorized. She'd forged a check. My checkbook had been in our home office in my desk drawer, and she'd written herself a check using one from the middle of the book, hoping I wouldn't notice for a while. She deposited it into her business account. When I confronted her this time, the tears didn't come. She looked exhausted, cornered. She admitted she was in serious financial trouble. Her business was failing. She'd been losing clients for over a year, bleeding money on overhead and failed marketing campaigns. She had over $60,000 in credit card debt of her own, plus the student loans she'd mentioned, which were actually closer to $80,000. She was 3 months behind on her car payment. She'd been using my money, our wedding budget, and the fraudulent credit cards to keep her business afloat and maintain the appearance of success. The wedding, she finally admitted, had spiraled completely out of control. The real cost was going to be close to $90,000, possibly more. She'd been signing contracts and putting down deposits on everything, convinced that if she could just make it to the wedding, her family would contribute more. Maybe some guests would give generous cash gifts, and somehow it would all work out. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. This woman I'd loved, planned a future with, shared my home and my life with, she'd been systematically destroying my financial security for over a year. I told her to leave. That night. I didn't care where she went, her mother's house, a friend's place, a hotel. She needed to be gone before I did something I'd regret, like call the police right then and there. She packed a bag and left, still trying to explain, to justify, to make me understand that she'd been desperate, that she'd panicked, that she never meant for it to get this bad. The next morning, I started making calls. First to my bank to report the forged check and start the process of recovering those funds. Then to the credit card companies to report the fraud and dispute the charges. Then to a lawyer. My attorney, Gerald, was a referral from a colleague. He was in his 60s, calm and methodical, with decades of experience in fraud cases. After I explained the situation, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Andrew, this is going to be complicated. She's your fiancée, you live together, and you'd been giving her access to your finances to some extent. Proving criminal fraud versus civil dispute could be difficult, and frankly, even if you press charges, recovering the money will be a long process." He advised me to document everything. Every transaction, every forged signature, every conversation we'd had about money. He said I needed to change all my passwords, close any joint accounts, put a permanent freeze on my credit, and consider filing a police report to create an official record of the fraud. I spent the next 3 days doing exactly that. I pulled bank statements going back 2 years. I contacted every vendor. Vanessa had hired and asked for copies of contracts and payment records. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. She'd opened 5 credit cards in my name, not 2. The total debt was over $43,000. She'd also taken out a personal loan through an online lender, forging my information for $15,000. She'd written 4 checks from my account, totaling nearly $19,000. And the money I'd personally given her, the venue deposit, the photographer, the dress, was gone, spent on her failing business and her personal debts. The grand total. Vanessa had stolen or fraudulently obtained over $85,000 in my name. I felt sick, angry, betrayed in a way I hadn't known was possible. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment mistake. This was calculated, sustained, deliberate theft over more than a year. But I also felt something else, determined. I was going to get my money back, and I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who Vanessa really was. The wedding was scheduled for September 11th. It was now mid-July. Vanessa had been staying with her mother and had been calling and texting me constantly, begging for another chance, insisting she'd get help, promising to pay back every penny. I ignored her. Instead, I focused on building my case. Gerald helped me file a police report for identity theft and fraud. The detective assigned to my case was sympathetic but realistic. "These things take time," he said. "Months, sometimes years, and if she doesn't have assets, you may never fully recover the money. That's when I came up with my plan. Vanessa had never officially canceled the wedding. She'd been too ashamed to tell her family or our friends what had happened. As far as everyone else knew, we'd had an argument, I'd kicked her out, and we were working through things. Her mother had called me twice, trying to mediate, convinced this was just cold feet or wedding stress. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for September 10th at an upscale Italian restaurant her parents had reserved. 40 people, our immediate families, wedding party, and closest friends. It was supposed to be an intimate celebration the night before the big day. I decided I would let Vanessa think there was still hope. I responded to one of her texts in early August. I told her I'd been thinking that maybe we could talk, that I wasn't ready to give up on us completely. She was ecstatic. She said she'd do anything, change everything, prove I could trust her again. I asked if the wedding vendors had been canceled. She admitted she hadn't done it yet, been holding out hope we'd reconcile. I told her not to cancel anything. I said we could still have the wedding if she was willing to be completely honest with me and work on rebuilding trust. I suggested we go to couples therapy. She agreed immediately. For the next month, I played the part. I met with her twice a week, always in public places. I let her believe I was softening, that I was considering forgiveness. Meanwhile, I was compiling everything. I created a folder with printed copies of every fraudulent credit card statement, every forged check, every contract she'd signed in my name. I had screenshots of her text messages where she'd admitted to the theft. I had recordings of our conversations where she'd confessed to stealing from me. New York is a one-party consent state, so the recordings were legal. Gerald thought I was insane. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned. "If you humiliate her publicly, it could backfire. She could claim emotional distress, harassment." But I knew Vanessa. She cared desperately about appearances, about what people thought of her. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being successful, sophisticated, admired. The worst thing I could do to her wasn't sending her to jail, it was exposing her to everyone she'd been trying to impress. The rehearsal dinner arrived. I wore my best suit. I brought the folder in a leather portfolio case. Vanessa looked beautiful in a white cocktail dress, her hair and makeup professionally done. She kept touching my arm, smiling at me, playing the role of the adoring fiancé. Her parents were thrilled to see us together. Her mother hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for giving her another chance." We all sat down to dinner, Vanessa and I at the head of the table, our parents on either side, the wedding party filling the rest of the seats. The restaurant had prepared a prix-fixe menu, 4 courses with wine pairings. Vanessa's father stood to give a toast about love and commitment and partnership. I waited until dessert was served. Then I stood, glass in hand, and asked for everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," I started. "For supporting Vanessa and me as we prepared to start our lives together. I know how much this wedding means to everyone, especially to Vanessa. She's put an extraordinary amount of work into planning every detail." Vanessa beamed at me, her eyes shining. She had no idea what was coming. "In fact," I continued, "she's been so dedicated to making this wedding perfect that she's spent over $85,000 on it." There were murmurs of surprise. That was a lot, even for a large wedding. "The thing is," I said, my voice still calm, still steady, "she spent that money by opening credit cards in my name without my knowledge, forging my signatures on loan applications, and writing checks from my account that I never authorized." The room went silent. Vanessa's face drained of color. I opened the portfolio and started pulling out documents. "Here's the credit card statement showing $43,000 charged to accounts I never opened. Here's the loan document with my forged signature. Here are the checks she wrote totaling $19,000. I walked around the table, placing copies in front of her parents, her sister, my parents. "Our friends. Vanessa has been committing identity theft and fraud for over a year," I said. "She's destroyed my credit, stolen my savings, and put me in debt that will take years to recover from. And she did it all while planning a wedding that was supposed to be about trust and partnership." Her mother was crying. Her father looked like he'd been slapped. My own parents sat frozen, unsure what to say or do. Vanessa finally found her voice. "Andrew, please, not like this." "When?" I asked. "When should I have told everyone? Before the wedding, so you could convince them I was overreacting. After the wedding, once you'd locked me into a legal partnership that would make it even harder to hold you accountable. You had a year to tell the truth. You chose to lie." She started crying, but they weren't the manipulative tears I'd seen before. These were tears of genuine shame, of exposure, of realizing she'd finally been caught in a way she couldn't talk her way out of. Her father spoke first. "Is this true, Vanessa?" She couldn't even look at him, she just nodded. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. He turned to me. "Andrew, I had no idea. We would have never if we'd known she was doing this. I'm not blaming you," I said. "You're not responsible for her choices, but I wanted you all to know the truth before tomorrow. There's not going to be a wedding. I've filed a police report for fraud and identity theft. I've submitted disputes to all the credit card companies and the bank. And I'll be pursuing every legal option to recover the money she stole from me." Vanessa's sister tried to speak. "Maybe you two can work this out privately." "She had that chance," I said. "Multiple chances. She chose to keep lying, keep stealing, keep building a fantasy on the foundation of fraud." I picked up my portfolio, left cash on the table to cover my portion of the meal, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa sobbing, her mother asking her how this could have happened. Her father demanding to know what else she'd lied about. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I'd said what I needed to say. The next morning, the day that was supposed to be my wedding, I met with Gerald to review the next steps. The criminal investigation was moving forward slowly, but forward. The credit card companies were treating the charges as fraud, which meant I wouldn't be liable for most of the debt once the investigations concluded. The bank had already refunded the forged checks after their own investigation. The personal loan was more complicated, but my lawyer was confident we could get it resolved. Vanessa's parents contacted me a week later. Her father called, his voice heavy and tired. He said they'd been going through her finances with her, and the situation was even worse than I'd described. She had over $140,000 in total debt: credit cards, student loans, business loans, the money she'd stolen from me. Her business was defunct, her credit destroyed. They'd agreed to help her file for bankruptcy and get into therapy, but they wanted me to know they understood why I'd done what I did. He apologized. He said they'd raised her to be better than this, and they were ashamed. I told him I appreciated the call, but I didn't want any further contact with Vanessa or her family. I needed to rebuild my life, and that meant cutting ties completely. The legal process took 8 months. The criminal case was ultimately resolved with a plea deal. Vanessa pled guilty to identity theft and fraud, received probation, community service, and was ordered to pay restitution. The amount was substantial, but Gerald warned me it would likely take years for me to see any of it, if ever. She had no assets and no income, but here's what I did get back: my peace of mind. My credit score gradually recovered. The fraudulent accounts were closed and removed from my report. The money I'd lost was painful but not devastating. I still had my condo, my job, my savings diminished but intact. More importantly, I learned what red flags look like. I learned that love doesn't mean ignoring warning signs or making excuses for behavior that crosses clear boundaries. I learned that financial compatibility isn't just about having similar incomes, it's about having similar values around honesty, transparency, and responsibility. I'm dating again now, slowly and cautiously. I've been upfront with new partners about what happened, not in a bitter way, but in a factual, this is part of my history way. Most people are understanding. Some share their own stories of betrayal or financial abuse. It's more common than I realized. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled the rehearsal dinner. Some people have told me it was too harsh, that I humiliated her unnecessarily. But here's the thing. Vanessa had been humiliating me for over a year. Every time she forged my signature, every time she lied to my face, every time she stole from me while planning our supposed future together, that was humiliation. The difference was, I'd been experiencing it alone in private while she maintained her perfect image. All I did was balance the scales. I made sure the truth was public, witnessed, undeniable. I made sure she couldn't spin the narrative or paint me as the villain. And I made sure everyone who cared about both of us understood exactly what had happened and why there would be no wedding. Would I have preferred a different ending to our relationship? Of course. I would have preferred that Vanessa had been the person I thought she was: honest, ambitious, financially responsible. But she wasn't. And once I discovered that truth, I had a choice: suffer in silence or demand accountability. I chose accountability. I chose transparency. I chose justice, even if it wasn't comfortable or polite. If you're in a situation where someone you love is financially abusing you, and yes, what Vanessa did was abuse, please understand that it's not going to get better on its own. Financial abuse escalates. It's a pattern of control and deception that only deepens over time. You deserve a partner who respects your boundaries, your resources, and your right to make informed decisions about your own life. Document everything. Protect your credit. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. And don't let love become a weapon someone uses against you. My name is Andrew. And this is how I learned that the most expensive wedding gift you can give yourself is freedom from a relationship built on lies. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. And remember, the truth always costs less than living a lie.